My name is Kevin and I collect old irons. We have in various of our previous categories shown some very large specimens, but there are large and there are really large. And I'm maybe a little unusual among collectors in that I like the really large irons and have been picking some of these up. And we've got a lot to show, and I think few, if any, of these that we're going to see today are ones that we've seen in the previous videos. Many companies that made old irons had quite a range of sizes listed in their catalog. For example, this is a Wapec iron from the Wapec Hollowware Company from Wapakoneta, Ohio. It is measured 14. That's meant to be the weight. I have weighed this and the actual weight is 13.9 pounds, and I find in general for these irons the weight on the iron is maybe rounded up to the next higher number just a wee bit. This is what I would generally call a pretty large iron, but the Wapec catalog shows this to be on the lower end of the size range for this type. Available in 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, and 30 pounds at 9 cents a pound. My experience is the 8-pounder is the most common. 30 pounders, and I've never seen one of these, is huge. Would this one be rare? Yes, I think so. I don't think that this size would have been a big seller. And I also think these would be the first thing to be thrown onto the scrap heap during World War II. You might remember from a previous video that the size range of the Chalfant Taylor irons went up to 28 pounds. And that is twice the weight of the most commonly found Taylor irons, which would be 12 or maybe 16 pounders. Are the rarity of these irons reflected in higher value? By and large, no. Collectors do not seek out the large irons because of their space needs. Among old irons, there is generally an inverse relationship between size and value. The smaller the irons, the higher the value. So this is a pretty big flat iron, calling it a flat iron by its basic shape. It's marked 14. I got this from Quebec City. The actual weight is about 15 pounds. Now, you might consider this to be a Taylor iron, but it's a bit more compact. It's got a rounded front. It's quite massive. It's 18 pounds. This is known as a sail iron, and I found it along the coast of southern Maine, and this would be used by the sailors. The sailors, of course, after their long trips, would come into port for provisions and whatnot, and in that they would be also taking the sails down, doing the maintenance, doing the washing, and the ironing of the sails, and this was the kind of irons that they used to do that. This is a monster flat iron. It's powered by natural gas, weighs 17 pounds. This is under the trade name Vulcan, made by the Crane Manufacturing Company. It has a 1903 patent date. This is another natural gas iron. The natural gas comes in through this pipe that swivels and then goes into the iron through the stem of the single post handle. These single post handles are pretty common in the large, particularly the natural gas irons. This one is labeled as 14. It weighs 14 pounds. There's no company markings. Perhaps the manufacturer was embarrassed. Still on the natural gas theme, this iron only weighs 10 pounds, but this is a hat iron, and we need to remind ourselves that most hat irons are relatively small. This particular iron is made by the Koenig Company in the Philadelphia region. The Koenig Company made a lot of the large irons and other iron stoves and things like that. Established in 1893, the company is still in business. This is my largest gasoline iron, certainly the iron of mine that has the largest tank. Weighs about 20 pounds. The iron has no markings, although I have to wonder with the little loop-de-loop here, maybe this is related to the Imperial Brass Company. It's not unusual for these large irons to have much in the way of markings. The inspiration for this video came when I came onto this one 2 weeks ago in an antique shop in central Maine. We've done a video on the irons in India, and they were large, but this one is especially large. It's all brass. It is, I think, from Indonesia rather than India, and I'm thinking that in part because of the Muslim crescent here. Also has an interesting grill on the inside. This could probably be sold separately as a stand, and maybe some are done that way. But this fits very nicely inside here. This weighs 21 pounds. Here is another Asian iron. I usually don't collect these things, but this one is all brass. It has the original wood handle, both of those being a bit unusual. And I found this in an antique shop in Central Maine about a month ago. This is called a pan iron. It would have coal on the inside, and then you'd whisk this above your fabric. The fabric oftentimes being silk. No markings, except that it has an M right here, and that means to me that this is probably American. There were Chinese pan irons in the US. In this display at the Museum of Chinese and American in Lower Manhattan shows the assemblage of irons. The second from the top, you'll notice, is a pan iron. I want to do a video on the Chinese pan irons, but it's not something I know very much about, and I am looking for a good collection, somebody that has more to show and better knowledge than I have that can share with me, so I can share with you. So if you know of that person or wish to volunteer for that, let me know, and I'll pay you a visit. Let's show a couple of quite large electric irons. This does not have any markings. I understand through Jay Raymond that this might be from the Universal Company, and I understand also that this is probably from the 1920s. I assumed that it was later because I thought this was a thermostat. Thermostats only happen in the later 1920s, but I'm informed that this is not a thermostat. Rather, this is a switch, and what you could is switch from lower to high. That would be increasing the resistance and then decreasing the amperage. And this is another electric iron. This is a rather early electric, about 1905. As you can tell by the way the wires go into the back of the iron, this has no markings, however. Its shape here, again with that single post structure, is quite typical of the large Taylorish type irons. And that same design is reflected in this iron. This iron is a slug iron and has the largest slug that I have seen in an old iron. No markings, but a nice piece. And that is what I have for a presentation on the really large irons, but when I look back at these, none of these are as large, at least in terms of weight, as that 30-pounder we talked about put out by the Wapak Hollowware Company. There were lots of very unusual irons, and these were irons that were used by people that had incredible biceps. With all that, I thank you for watching. Please make your comments, ask me your questions, and become subscribers, and I will see you again.